I'm Sarah, 34, and I learned that sometimes the people who raised you can become your greatest enemies. For 8 years, my husband and I carefully saved $180,000 for our twin daughters' college education. Then my parents did the unthinkable. They convinced my brother Marcus to forge documents and drain every penny for his failing restaurant venture. What they didn't know was that I had been secretly building something they never suspected. A trust fund worth $2.3 million that would make their betrayal look like pocket change. But before I reveal how I turned their deception into the sweetest justice imaginable, let me take you back to where this nightmare began. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Growing up in suburban Phoenix, I was the daughter every parent dreams of having. While other kids were getting into trouble or struggling with grades, I was the one organizing neighborhood charity drives at age 10 and graduating valedictorian from Mountain View High School. My parents, David and Linda Patterson, ran a successful accounting firm together, and they raised me with what seemed like solid family values. Family comes first, always, Dad would say during our Sunday dinners. We support each other through everything, no matter what. Those words felt like gospel to me back then. I believed them completely. Hates. My younger brother Marcus was a different story entirely. 3 years my junior, he had charm that could melt ice but zero sense of responsibility. Where I saved every birthday dollar in a piggy bank, Marcus spent his allowance before he even received it. Where I studied for hours to maintain my perfect GPA, Marcus barely scraped by with C's and D's. But somehow, our parents treated these fundamental differences like they were equally valuable personality traits. Marcus has people skills, Mom would explain when teachers called about his missing assignments. Not everyone needs to be academic like Sarah. He'll find his own path. Even then, I noticed how quickly they forgave his mistakes while expecting perfection from me. When Marcus crashed Dad's car at 17 because he was texting while driving, they bought him a newer model within a month. When I asked to borrow their car for my part-time job interview, they made me take a defensive driving course first. Still, I loved my family deeply. I graduated from Arizona State University with honors, landed a position at a prestigious marketing firm in downtown Phoenix, and married my college sweetheart, James Chen, when I was 25. James was everything I valued in a person: honest, hardworking, and completely devoted to building a stable future together. He worked as a software engineer for a growing tech company, and we both shared the same dream: creating a better life for the family we planned to have. When our twin daughters, Emma and Olivia, were born a year later, I felt like my life had reached perfect alignment. James and I were both earning good salaries, we'd bought a beautiful 4-bedroom house in Scottsdale, and we immediately started planning for our girls' futures. The day we brought them home from the hospital, we opened their college savings accounts. 18 years from now, these little angels are going to have every opportunity we can give them, James said as he filled out the paperwork. No student loans, no financial stress, just pure freedom to study whatever they're passionate about. We committed to saving $500 per month for each daughter, and we never missed a payment. Not once in 8 years. My parents seemed thrilled about being grandparents. They visited constantly, spoiled the girls with gifts, and constantly talked about how proud they were of the family James and I were building. "You two are doing everything right," Dad would beam as he watched Emma and Olivia play in our backyard. "These girls are going to have advantages we could only dream of when you were little." What I didn't realize was how much Marcus resented our success. After bouncing between jobs for years, sales associate, personal trainer, insurance agent, he had convinced himself that he was destined for entrepreneurship. At 28, he announced that he was going to open an upscale Italian restaurant in downtown Phoenix. "This is it," he declared during one family dinner. "I've found my calling. Fine dining, authentic recipes, the whole experience. I'm going to revolutionize Phoenix's restaurant scene." He had no culinary training, no restaurant experience, and no business plan, but he spoke with such confidence that our parents were immediately enchanted. "Marcus has finally found his passion," Mom gushed to me privately. "You know how important it is to follow your dreams." When I gently suggested that the restaurant industry was notoriously difficult and maybe Marcus should start smaller, she looked at me like I'd suggested something cruel. "Why can't you be supportive of your brother?" Not everyone needs to take the safe path like you did. The safe path. As if working 60-hour weeks to build my career and sacrificing luxuries to save for my daughter's education was somehow less admirable than Marcus's latest get-rich-quick scheme. But I bit my tongue because family harmony had always been important to me. I wanted to believe that Marcus had finally matured, that maybe this restaurant venture would be the making of him. The early signs were troubling, though. Marcus had grandiose plans, but no real funding strategy. He talked about investors who never materialized, and partnerships that fell through. He'd spend weeks designing elaborate menus for a restaurant that existed only in his imagination, complete with expensive wine selections and imported ingredients that would have made profitability impossible. "I need about $300,000 to get started," he told our parents casually one evening. "The location I found is perfect, but the lease requires 6 months up front, plus renovation costs, equipment, initial inventory. It's a significant investment, but the returns will be incredible." I watched Dad's face carefully during this conversation. He was doing calculations in his head, I could tell. Our parents were comfortable financially, but they weren't wealthy enough to hand over $300,000 without it impacting their retirement plans significantly. Still, the look in his eyes told me he was seriously considering it. "That's a substantial amount, son," Dad said slowly. "Let me see your business plan, your market research, projected revenues." Marcus's confidence flickered for just a moment. "I'm still putting the formal documents together," he said. "But Dad, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. The restaurant space just became available, and if I don't move fast, someone else will snatch it up." The pressure tactics were classic Marcus. Create urgency, appeal to emotion, avoid detailed scrutiny. I'd seen him use the same approach to talk his way out of trouble since childhood. What shocked me was how readily our parents seemed to fall for it, even as adults who ran their own successful business. Over the following months, I watched Marcus become increasingly desperate as his restaurant dreams failed to materialize. The investors he'd been counting on turned out to be casual acquaintances who had never committed to anything. The restaurant space he'd fallen in love with was rented to someone else. His backup plans all required funding he didn't have. But instead of accepting reality or scaling down his ambitions, Marcus doubled down on the fantasy. He started talking about different locations, different concepts, different timelines. The numbers kept changing, but the requests for money became more frequent and more urgent. And our parents, who had always struggled to say no to their charming younger son, were being worn down by his persistent requests for help. I should have seen what was coming. The signs were all there. Marcus's increasing desperation, our parents' growing financial anxiety, and the way conversations stopped abruptly whenever I entered the room during family gatherings. But I was busy with my own life, focused on my career and raising 2 active 7-year-olds. I trusted my family completely, especially when it came to respecting the boundaries James and I had established for our daughter's future. That trust was about to cost me everything I had worked so hard to build. But it would also lead to discoveries that would change the entire power dynamic of our family forever. What my parents and Marcus didn't know was that I had been quietly building something much bigger than they could imagine. Something that would make their betrayal look not just cruel, but incredibly foolish. Betrayal? The foundation was set, the players were in position, and the betrayal that would reshape all our lives was just weeks away. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The first crack in my perfect family facade appeared on a Tuesday morning in March. I was rushing to get Emma and Olivia ready for school when my phone rang. The caller ID showed First National Bank, where we kept the girls' college savings accounts. I almost didn't answer, assuming it was just a routine marketing call, but something made me pick up. "Mrs. Chen, this is Bradley Morrison from First National's Fraud Prevention Department," the voice said. "We're calling about some unusual activity on accounts ending in 4729 and 4730. Those were my daughter's college fund account numbers." My stomach dropped instantly. "What kind of unusual activity?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady while Emma tugged at my sleeve asking about her lunch money. Large withdrawals initiated yesterday evening through our online banking platform. Both accounts show complete closures with funds transferred to an external account. Given the substantial amounts involved, our system flagged these transactions for verification. The world seemed to stop spinning. I'm sorry, did you say complete closures? Both accounts are empty? Yes, ma'am. $90,347 from account $4,729 and $89,653 from account $4,730. The transfers were authorized using your login credentials and security questions. We're required to verify these weren't unauthorized transactions. My hands started shaking. Sir, I did not authorize any withdrawals. Someone has stolen this money. Emma and Olivia were staring at me now, sensing something was wrong. I forced myself to breathe normally. I need to come in immediately. Can you freeze any further activity? Absolutely. I'm placing security holds on all your accounts right now. Can you be here within the hour? I called in sick to work, dropped the girls at school with shaky explanations about a banking error, and drove straight to the bank. Bradley Morrison was a thin, serious man in his 40s who clearly dealt with financial crimes regularly. He walked me through the transaction logs with professional detachment. The withdrawals were initiated at 11:47 p.m. yesterday from an IP address in Phoenix, he explained, pointing to his computer screen. The login used your username and password, plus correctly answered all security questions: mother's maiden name, first pet's name, street you grew up on. Whoever did this had access to very personal information. I stared at the screen in disbelief. The security questions. Those answers aren't written down anywhere. Someone would have to know me personally to answer them correctly. Exactly. In cases like this, fraud typically involves someone close to the victim, a family member, close friend, someone with intimate knowledge of your personal history. His words hit me like a physical blow. Do you have any idea who might have this information? My mind raced through possibilities. James had access to our accounts, but he was as devastated about our daughter's futures as I was. My parents knew some of the security answers from family conversations over the years. And Marcus had been around during all those childhood stories, knew about our first dog Buddy, knew Mom's maiden name was Rodriguez. The external account the money was transferred to, I said slowly. Can you tell me anything about it? Bradley consulted his notes. It's a business account at Desert Community Bank. The account name is Bella Vista Restaurant Group, LLC. Mean anything to you? The room started spinning. Bella Vista. That was the name Marcus had chosen for his restaurant concept. I gripped the edge of the desk to steady myself. Yes, I whispered. I know exactly what that means. The drive home was a blur of rage and disbelief. My own brother had stolen my daughter's future. But how? Marcus didn't have our account information or passwords. He'd never even been inside our house when we were doing online banking. Unless... Then I remembered. 3 weeks ago, Marcus had visited for Emma's 8th birthday party. He'd been unusually helpful, offering to clean up while James and I dealt with overtired children and sugar crashes. I'd left my laptop open on the kitchen counter with my password manager still logged in. Marcus could have easily accessed our banking information during those 20 minutes when everyone was distracted. But the security questions required deeper knowledge, family history that only someone who'd grown up with me would know. Which meant this wasn't just Marcus acting alone. Someone had helped him. Someone who knew all my childhood details. I called James first, my voice breaking as I explained what had happened. Someone drained the girls' college funds. All of it. Gone. The silence on the other end stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. What do you mean gone? That's impossible. Those accounts require both our signatures for large withdrawals. Not for online transfers, apparently. Someone used my login credentials and answered all the security questions correctly. James. I think it was Marcus. The money went to his restaurant business account. The explosion of profanity that followed was unlike anything I'd ever heard from my usually calm husband. When he finally found words again, his voice was ice cold. We're calling the police. Right now. And then we're calling your parents. Because if Marcus did this, they either helped him or they need to know what their son has become. But I hesitated to involve my parents immediately. Some small part of me still hoped this was a misunderstanding, that there was an explanation that wouldn't destroy our family completely. I decided to confront Marcus first, to give him a chance to explain himself before involving law enforcement. I drove to Marcus's apartment complex, a rundown place in Tempe where he'd been living since his last roommate situation fell apart. His unit was on the 3rd floor, and I could hear music playing inside when I knocked. It took several rounds of increasingly loud knocking before he finally answered the door. The Marcus who opened the door was not the desperate, struggling brother I'd been expecting. He was wearing expensive clothes I'd never seen before, his hair was professionally styled, and there was a confidence in his posture that seemed completely out of place for someone who'd been lamenting his financial struggles just weeks ago. "Sarah, what a surprise," he said, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. "What brings you by? We need to talk about Bella Vista Restaurant Group, and where you got $180,000 to fund it." I watched his face carefully, looking for any sign of guilt or remorse. Instead, I saw calculation. "I'm not sure what you mean," he said slowly. "Maybe you should come in." His apartment had been transformed. New furniture, a massive flat-screen TV, expensive electronics everywhere. For someone who'd been claiming poverty for months, he was living like he'd won the lottery. "Nice place," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Business must be good." Marcus closed the door behind me and crossed his arms defensively. "I've had some luck with investments lately. Sometimes taking risks pays off." The lie rolled off his tongue so smoothly, I almost admired his audacity. "Investments like stealing your niece's college funds?" I pulled out my phone and showed him the bank transaction records Bradley had printed for me. "Bella Vista Restaurant Group, LLC, your business account. My daughter's money. Want to explain how that happened?" For the first time, Marcus's composure cracked. His eyes darted to the papers, then back to my face, then around the room like he was looking for an escape route. "I don't know what you're talking about. If money went to my business account, it must be a banking error. A banking error that required my username, password, and correct answers to personal security questions? Marcus, they have digital records of everything. IP addresses, timestamps, the whole trail. This isn't a mistake, it's theft. And you're going to fix it right now." Marcus sat down heavily on his expensive new couch, running his hands through his hair. For a moment, I thought he was going to confess, maybe even show some remorse. Instead, he looked up at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Cold, calculating, almost predatory. "Prove it," he said quietly. "Prove I had anything to do with this. You have bank records showing money went to my business account, but that doesn't prove I initiated the transfers. Maybe someone else did it and used my account as a dumping ground. Maybe you did it yourself for insurance fraud. Maybe James did it and you just don't know." The audacity was breathtaking. Not only was he refusing to confess, he was actively trying to gaslight me into doubting what I knew to be true. "Marcus, I know it was you. The question is whether you're going to make this right voluntarily, or whether I'm going to have to involve the police and destroy your life." He stood up, suddenly looking more confident again. "Go ahead, call the police. See what they say when they investigate and find out that technically, no crime was committed." My confusion must have shown on my face because he smiled that charming smile that had gotten him out of trouble his entire life. "You see, Sarah, I had help with this. Someone with legitimate access to your accounts. Someone who had every legal right to make those transfers." The pieces started clicking together in my mind, but I didn't want to believe what I was thinking. "Mom and Dad," I whispered. "They're joint account holders from when we first opened the accounts. They still have legal access." Bingo. So technically, they moved money from accounts they're legally authorized to access into an investment they believed in. It's not theft if the account holders approve the transaction. Marcus was enjoying this now, savoring his cleverness. But they used my login credentials. They pretended to be me. Did they? Or did you share your login information with family members you trusted? Hard to prove intent when families share financial information all the time. He was right, and we both knew it. Legally, this might not qualify as theft if my parents had been involved. "Why?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "Why would they do this to Emma and Olivia? Their own granddaughters?" Marcus's expression softened slightly, but not with remorse, with pity. Because they believe in me, Sarah. They see potential in my business that you're too conservative to recognize. The restaurant industry is booming. With the right concept and proper funding, I could turn that $180,000 into millions. Emma and Olivia will thank us someday when I'm successful enough to pay for their college and graduate school. And if you fail, if the restaurant goes under like 90% of new restaurants do, then at least we tried something bold, instead of just letting money sit in savings accounts earning nothing. The casual dismissal of 8 years of careful planning made my blood boil. That money wasn't earning nothing. It was earning security for my children. It was earning the freedom to choose any college they wanted without financial stress. It was earning peace of mind for James and me. But Marcus had already stopped listening. He was checking his phone, probably texting someone about our conversation. Look, Sarah, I know you're upset right now, but give this some time. When Bella Vista takes off, you'll see that we made the right choice. In the meantime, Emma and Olivia can apply for scholarships, student loans, all the options other kids use. They're smart girls. They'll figure it out. The casual assumption that my daughters should just accept a future of debt because Marcus wanted to play restaurateur was the last straw. I stood up, grabbed my purse, and headed for the door. This isn't over, Marcus. Not even close. Actually, it is, he called after me. Because there's nothing you can do about it. Mom and Dad made a legal financial decision. End of story. As I drove away from his apartment, my phone rang. Mom's name appeared on the caller ID. The conversation I'd been dreading was about to begin. But what my family didn't know was that while they'd been plotting to steal my daughter's future, I'd been quietly building something that would make their betrayal look like pocket change. The trust fund they were about to discover would change everything. Mom's call came exactly 17 minutes after I left Marcus's apartment. I sat in my car in a grocery store parking lot, staring at her name on my phone screen, knowing that answering would change everything between us forever. But I needed to hear her voice, needed to understand how the woman who had taught me about honesty and integrity could participate in stealing from her own granddaughters. Hi, sweetie. Mom's voice was artificially bright, the tone she used when she was nervous about something. I was just thinking about the girls. How are Emma and Olivia doing with their dance classes? The casual small talk while my world was collapsing felt surreal. Mom, we need to talk. About the college funds. About what you and Marcus did. The silence stretched so long I wondered if she'd hung up. When she finally spoke, her voice had changed completely. Gone was the nervous cheerfulness, replaced by something I'd never heard from her before. Cold defensiveness. I think you should come over. Your father and I need to explain some things to you. The drive to my childhood home in North Phoenix felt like traveling back in time, but not in a comforting way. Every familiar landmark. The elementary school where I'd won the spelling bee, the park where Dad taught me to ride a bike, the ice cream shop where we celebrated good report cards, now felt tainted by the knowledge that the people who had created those memories had betrayed me in the most fundamental way possible. I found both my parents waiting in the living room, sitting stiffly on the couch like they were preparing for battle. Dad's accounting ledgers were spread across the coffee table, and Mom clutched a tissue box in her lap. The scene looked rehearsed, like they'd been planning this conversation. Before you say anything, Dad began without preamble, I want you to understand that everything we did was legal. We are joint account holders on Emma and Olivia's college funds. We had every right to make financial decisions regarding those accounts. The lawyer speak, coming from my father, who had always prided himself on plain talk and family loyalty, was more shocking than Marcus's casual cruelty. Legal doesn't mean right, Dad. Those accounts were for my daughter's education. You knew that. You helped us set them up specifically for that purpose. The purpose hasn't changed, Mom interjected, her voice taking on that patient tone she'd used when I was a child, refusing to understand why I couldn't have something I wanted. The money is still going toward the girls' futures. It's just taking a different path to get there. A different path? You gave it to Marcus for a restaurant that doesn't even exist yet. A restaurant that has a 90% chance of failing. I was fighting to keep my voice down, aware that their neighbors might hear, but the absurdity of their justification was making rational discussion impossible. Dad leaned forward, pointing to his ledgers. I've run the numbers, Sarah. Marcus's business plan is solid. The location he's identified has excellent foot traffic, the demographic analysis shows strong demand for upscale Italian dining in that area, and his projected profit margins are conservative but realistic. You've seen a business plan? Marcus told me yesterday that he was still putting together the formal documents. The lie had slipped out so easily when Marcus was trying to convince them to invest, but apparently he'd managed to cobble something together once he realized they were serious about wanting documentation. He brought us a comprehensive proposal 3 weeks ago, Mom said, reaching for a folder on the side table. Financial projections, market analysis, startup costs, everything. Your father spent hours reviewing it with his accounting expertise. She handed me a bound document titled Bella Vista Restaurant Group Investment Proposal. The cover looked professional, but as I flipped through the pages, I could see it was mostly generic restaurant industry statistics downloaded from the internet, combined with wildly optimistic revenue projections that had no basis in reality. Dad, this is fantasy. Look at these numbers. He's projecting $2 million in first-year revenue for a restaurant that's going to seat maybe 60 people. That would require turning every table 4 times per night, every single night, at premium prices. It's mathematically impossible. Every business requires optimism, Dad replied stiffly. You can't succeed if you don't believe in your vision. There's a difference between optimism and delusion. This document shows Marcus expects to be profitable from month 1, which is unheard of in the restaurant industry. Most successful restaurants take 2 to 3 years just to break even. I was using my marketing experience to analyze the proposal, and everything about it screamed amateur hour. But my parents weren't hearing logic. I could see it in their eyes. They had already committed emotionally to this decision, and no amount of rational argument would change their minds. This wasn't really about business projections or investment returns. This was about something much deeper. Why? I asked quietly. Help me understand why you would risk Emma and Olivia's futures for this. Why you would lie to me and James. Why you would let Marcus steal from his own nieces. Mom's composure finally cracked. Tears started flowing as she reached for another tissue. Because we failed him, Sarah. We failed Marcus as parents, and this is our chance to make it right. The confession hung in the air like a toxic cloud. What do you mean you failed him? We always expected him to be like you, Dad said, his voice heavy with guilt. Academic success, career achievement, traditional markers of success. But Marcus learns differently. Processes information differently. The traditional path never worked for him, and instead of adapting our expectations, we just kept pushing him to be something he wasn't. So you decided to steal from your granddaughters to make up for your parenting mistakes? We didn't steal anything. Mom's voice rose sharply. We made an investment in our son's future. And it's not just about Marcus. This restaurant could become a family business. Something Emma and Olivia could inherit someday. Something much more valuable than just college tuition money sitting in a bank account. The rationalization was breathtaking. They had convinced themselves that stealing my daughter's education fund was actually a gift to my daughters. Mom, Emma and Olivia are 8 years old. They want to be a veterinarian and an astronaut, not restaurant owners. You can't just decide their futures for them. Dreams change, Dad said dismissively. When I was 8, I wanted to be a cowboy. Practical opportunities matter more than childhood fantasies. So you've decided that Marcus's practical opportunity matters more than Emma and Olivia's educational opportunities? The question hung in the air unanswered because we all knew the truth. They had chosen Marcus over their granddaughters. They had chosen their guilt over our trust. They had chosen to enable his irresponsibility rather than face the consequences of their own parenting decisions. There's something else you need to know, Mom said quietly. This isn't the first time we've helped Marcus financially. Over the past 5 years, we've given him almost $75,000 for various ventures and emergencies. Our retirement savings are significantly depleted. The admission hit me like a physical blow. $75,000? For what? The tech startup that didn't work out. The personal training certification and equipment. Car repairs and insurance after accidents. Rent money when he was between jobs. Credit card debt from his attempts to network and build business connections. Dad ticked off the items like he was reading a grocery list. So this restaurant venture isn't just about believing in Marcus's potential. You're desperate to see a return on all the money you've already lost on him. That's not fair, Mom protested. We believe in this restaurant concept. It's different from his previous ideas. Different how? Because it's more expensive? Because it requires stealing from children to fund it? I was no longer trying to control my anger. You've thrown away your retirement, and now you're gambling with my daughter's futures to chase Marcus's fantasies. Your daughters will be fine, Dad said with infuriating certainty. They're smart, they'll qualify for scholarships, and they have parents with good incomes. They don't need that money the way Marcus needs this opportunity. The casual dismissal of 8 years of financial planning and sacrifice was the final straw. You're right about one thing, Dad. Emma and Olivia will be fine. Because unlike Marcus, they won't be depending on handouts from family members who enable their worst impulses. I stood up to leave, but Mom grabbed my arm. Sarah, please. Don't let this destroy our family. We can work through this together. You destroyed our family the moment you decided to steal from my children. There's no working through that. We didn't steal anything, Dad repeated mechanically. We made a legal financial decision as joint account holders. Keep telling yourself that. Maybe eventually you'll actually believe it. I pulled free from Mom's grip and headed for the door. Where are you going? Mom called after me. To protect what's left of my daughter's futures. And to make sure you never have the opportunity to steal from them again. As I drove away from my parents' house, my phone buzzed with a text from James. Girls are asking why you seemed upset this morning. What do I tell them? The question broke my heart. Emma and Olivia had no idea that their own grandparents and uncle had stolen their college money. They still believed in family loyalty and unconditional love. How do you explain to 8-year-olds that the adults they trust most in the world had betrayed them? But as I thought about it, I realized my daughters didn't need to know about this betrayal. Because unlike my parents, I had actually been planning for the worst-case scenario. While they were busy enabling Marcus and depleting their retirement savings, I had been quietly building something they knew nothing about. The trust fund I'd established 5 years ago had grown to $2.3 million, carefully invested and completely separate from any accounts my parents could access. It was my insurance policy against exactly this kind of family dysfunction, and it was about to become my weapon of choice. My parents thought they were so clever, using their legal account access to fund Marcus's dreams while dismissing Emma and Olivia's futures as easily replaceable with scholarships and loans. What they didn't know was that their granddaughters were already set for life, multiple times over. And when they found out about the trust fund, when they realized the magnitude of what I'd built while they were playing their little family politics games, the shock was going to destroy them. The war they had started was about to become a rout, and I was going to enjoy every moment of their humiliation. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. While my family was busy congratulating themselves on their clever financial maneuvering, I was going to do what I did best: gather information, analyze the situation, and develop a strategic response. But first, I needed to understand exactly how deep this conspiracy went, and what legal options I actually had. I called in sick to work again, and spent the morning researching financial fraud laws in Arizona. What I discovered was both frustrating and illuminating. Marcus had been right about one thing. Since my parents were joint account holders on the college funds, they did have legal authority to make withdrawals. The fact that they'd used my login credentials to do it was ethically questionable, but probably not criminal. However, the more I dug into the legal framework, the more I realized there might be other angles to pursue. The college funds had been established with specific documentation stating their purpose. I had emails from the bank confirming the accounts were designated education savings accounts with tax advantages tied to their educational use. If Marcus's restaurant failed and the money was never recovered, there could be tax consequences for my parents that they hadn't considered. More importantly, I started thinking about this from a civil rather than criminal perspective. Even if no crime had been committed, Marcus and my parents had caused significant financial harm to my family. James and I had been making financial decisions for 8 years, based on the assumption that Emma and Olivia's college costs were covered. We'd chosen a more expensive house, taken fewer vacations, and made career choices that prioritized family time over maximum income because we believed our daughter's educational needs were secure. I called Rebecca Martinez, a family law attorney I'd met through work networking events. Rebecca specialized in financial disputes between family members, and she agreed to see me that afternoon for a consultation. "This is a complex situation," Rebecca said after reviewing the documentation I'd brought. "Your parents are technically within their legal rights as joint account holders, but there are several factors that could work in your favor if you decide to pursue civil litigation. Such as? First, the stated purpose of the accounts. These weren't general investment accounts, they were specifically designated for educational expenses. Second, the deceptive way the withdrawals were made using your login credentials could be construed as identity theft, even if no criminal charges would stick. Third, if you can demonstrate that your parents knew Marcus's business venture was high risk or likely to fail, you might have a case for negligent or intentional mismanagement of funds they held in trust." Rebecca leaned back in her chair, studying my face carefully. "But before you decide to go down this road, I need to ask, what's your real goal here? Do you want the money back, or do you want to punish your family for betraying you?" The question caught me off guard. "I want my daughters to have the secure future James and I planned for them." "And if your daughters' futures were already secure through other means, would you still want to pursue this?" I stared at her, wondering how much to reveal. "Hypothetically? Hypothetically? Then, I suppose it would be about accountability, about making sure there are consequences for breaking trust and stealing from children, even if those children don't end up suffering financially." Rebecca nodded slowly. "That's an expensive form of accountability. Civil litigation like this could cost $50,000 to $100,000 in legal fees, take years to resolve, and permanently destroy your family relationships. You need to decide if holding them accountable is worth that price." I thanked Rebecca for her time and left with more questions than answers. But her comment about my daughter's futures being secure through other means had planted a seed. Maybe it was time to accelerate my timeline for revealing the trust fund, not as a weapon of revenge, but as a way to demonstrate just how catastrophically my family had miscalculated. That evening, James and I sat down for the most important financial conversation of our marriage. I'd been keeping the full extent of my investment activities from him, not out of deception, but because I'd wanted to surprise him when the numbers became truly impressive. But recent events had changed everything. "I need to tell you about something I've been working on for the past 5 years, I began. "Something that changes our entire financial picture." James looked up from his laptop, where he'd been researching student loan options for Emma and Olivia. The stress of the past few days had aged him years. "If you tell me you've been gambling in Vegas, I might actually lose it." "Nothing like that. Do you remember when I started freelance consulting for tech startups about 3 years into my current job?" "Sure. You said it was good experience and brought in some extra income." "It brought in more than extra income. A lot more. And I've been investing the proceeds very strategically." I pulled out my laptop and opened the portfolio management software I'd been using. "James, look at this." The numbers on the screen made him go very still. "Sarah, what am I looking at?" "My investment portfolio, built entirely from consulting income over the past 5 years, plus aggressive but calculated investing in growth stocks, tech startups, and cryptocurrency during the early adoption phases." The total portfolio value showed $2,347,892. James stared at the screen for a full minute without speaking. When he finally looked at me, his expression was a mixture of amazement and something that might have been hurt. $2.5 million? You've been sitting on $2.5 million while I've been panicking about our daughter's college funds? I wanted it to be a surprise. I was planning to reveal it on our 10th wedding anniversary next year as a gift: financial independence, early retirement options, the ability to travel and give the girls experiences we never imagined possible. But instead, your family stole from our children, and you let me spend 3 days thinking we were financially ruined. I could hear the edge in his voice and realized I'd handled this revelation badly. "James, I'm sorry. I should have told you immediately after the bank called. I was just so angry, so focused on the betrayal aspect that I wasn't thinking clearly about the practical implications." He closed the laptop and pulled me into a hug. No, I'm sorry. I shouldn't be upset with you for being an incredible investor and financial planner. It's just, this changes everything. Emma and Olivia aren't just going to be okay, they're going to be wealthy. Not wealthy, secure. There's a difference. I pulled back to look at him. But you're right that it changes everything. My family thinks they've damaged our daughter's futures while funding Marcus's pipe dreams. They have no idea that Emma and Olivia are already set for life multiple times over. What do you want to do with this information? I'd been thinking about that question all day. I want to let them dig themselves deeper. I want to watch Marcus fail spectacularly with the restaurant, watch my parents realize they've destroyed their retirement for nothing, and then reveal that their sacrifice was completely pointless because I'd already secured our daughter's futures through my own efforts. That's pretty harsh. They stole from children, James. My children. Your children. They looked at Emma and Olivia's college funds and decided Marcus's dreams were more important than their granddaughter's education. They deserve whatever emotional consequences come from learning the truth. James was quiet for a long moment. Okay, but I have one condition. We tell the girls about the trust fund now. Not the details about your family, just that they don't need to worry about college costs. I don't want them stressed about their futures because of our family drama. Agreed. They deserve to know they're secure. We called Emma and Olivia into our home office and explained that Mommy had been doing some special work that had earned enough money to pay for their college educations, and much more. The girls' reactions were perfectly age-appropriate. Emma wanted to know if this meant she could get a horse, and Olivia asked if we could buy a swimming pool. College first, James told them. But yes, we can probably manage a swimming pool. Over the next week, I became a very interested observer of Marcus's restaurant venture. Through carefully worded questions during family phone calls, I learned that he'd already signed a lease on his chosen location, hired a contractor for renovations, and placed orders for commercial kitchen equipment. He was spending money at a rate that would exhaust the stolen college funds within 2 months. Meanwhile, I started my own quiet investigation into Marcus's business planning. I visited his chosen location during lunch hours and dinner times, counting foot traffic and observing the demographic mix. I researched the other restaurants in the area, their prices, and their apparent success levels. I analyzed local health department records for restaurant failures in the same neighborhood. Everything I discovered confirmed my initial assessment. Marcus had chosen a terrible location for an upscale Italian restaurant. The foot traffic was primarily office workers looking for quick, cheap lunches, not affluent diners seeking expensive dinner experiences. 2 upscale restaurants in the same strip mall had failed within the past 3 years. The rent Marcus was paying would require revenue levels that were simply impossible given the location's limitations. But I didn't share this research with anyone. Instead, I waited. And watched. And prepared for the moment when Marcus's inevitable failure would prove just how poor my parents' judgment had been. 3 weeks after the confrontation at my parents' house, Mom called with an update she couldn't contain her excitement about. Sarah, I know you're still upset with us, but I had to tell you, Marcus has made incredible progress with the restaurant. The renovations are almost finished, and he's already interviewing staff. The grand opening is scheduled for next month. That's nice, Mom. I thought maybe you and James and the girls would like to come to the opening night celebration. As family. The invitation was an olive branch, an attempt to normalize our relationship by acting like nothing had happened. I don't think that's a good idea. Sarah, please. I know we made decisions you don't agree with, but Marcus is our family. This restaurant is going to change everything for him. For all of us. I hope you're right, Mom. I really do. But I knew she wasn't. And soon, everyone else would know it too. The stage was set for Marcus's spectacular failure, my parents' crushing disappointment, and my own devastating revelation about the trust fund they'd never suspected existed. Justice was coming, and it was going to be sweeter than any revenge I could have planned. 2 months after Marcus burned through my daughter's college funds, Bella Vista Restaurant held its grand opening. I wasn't there, but I didn't need to be. I had positioned myself at a coffee shop across the street with a perfect view of the entrance, armed with a notebook and a camera with a telephoto lens. What I witnessed that night was a masterclass in business failure. The grand opening celebration that my parents had been so excited about consisted of maybe 30 people, most of whom I recognized as family friends and Marcus's former co-workers. The restaurant's interior looked impressive through the windows. Marcus had spared no expense on decor, lighting, and furnishings. But impressive decor doesn't generate revenue, and from my vantage point, I could see the fundamental problems that would doom this venture. The location Marcus had chosen was in a strip mall, anchored by a discount grocery store and a nail salon. The surrounding businesses catered to budget-conscious customers, not the affluent diners Marcus needed to justify his $40 entree prices. I watched potential customers park, look at the menu posted outside, and then drive away when they saw the pricing. By 8 p.m., 2 hours after the official opening, there were more staff members visible inside than paying customers. The servers were standing around looking bored, while Marcus, dressed in an expensive suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly grocery budget, kept checking his phone and pacing near the entrance. I ordered another coffee and settled in to watch the disaster unfold. Around 9 p.m., I witnessed something that would have been hilarious if it wasn't so pathetic. A family with 2 young children walked in, clearly having expected the kind of casual Italian restaurant that their strip mall location suggested. I watched through the windows as they were seated, given menus, and then quickly realized they were in the wrong place entirely. The parents' body language showed their shock at the prices, and within 10 minutes, they were apologizing to their server and leaving without ordering anything. This scene repeated itself 4 more times during the evening. People would wander in expecting affordable family dining and flee when confronted with Marcus's delusional pricing structure. By 10 p.m., the restaurant was essentially empty, except for the original group of family and friends who were clearly staying out of obligation rather than enjoyment. I took detailed notes of everything I observed, including the fact that Marcus had hired far too many staff members for the actual customer volume. Through the windows, I could count at least 6 servers for fewer than 20 occupied seats. The math was simple and devastating. Even if every table had been full all night at maximum prices, the revenue wouldn't have covered the labor costs, let alone rent, food costs, and other expenses. The grand opening was supposed to be the restaurant's best night, the evening when word of mouth would begin building the customer base that would sustain the business. Instead, it was clear evidence that Marcus had created an expensive solution to a problem that didn't exist. There was no demand for upscale Italian dining in that location at those prices. I drove home that night feeling vindicated but also genuinely sad for my parents. They had sacrificed their retirement and their integrity for this inevitable failure. They had genuinely believed Marcus's projections, and watching their investment collapse in real time was going to devastate them. Over the following weeks, I made regular reconnaissance visits to Bella Vista during lunch and dinner hours. The pattern was consistent and predictable. Mostly empty dining room, overstaffed with servers who had nothing to do, and Marcus looking increasingly desperate as he realized his miscalculations. 3 weeks after opening, I noticed that the lunch service had been discontinued entirely. The business hours sign on the door now showed dinner only, Thursday through Saturday. Marcus was already cutting services to reduce costs, which meant the revenue was nowhere near projections. A month after opening, half the tables had been removed from the dining room, and the remaining space was rearranged to make the restaurant look less obviously empty. The staff had been reduced to 2 servers and a hostess, but even that was more than the customer traffic justified. During this period, my parents maintained an increasingly strained optimism whenever I spoke with them. Mom would call with updates about positive reviews from customers, and Dad would mention steady progress in building a customer base. But I could hear the worry creeping into their voices. They were starting to realize that Marcus's confident projections weren't materializing. Meanwhile, I was documenting everything. I collected local newspaper food reviews, monitored online review sites, and tracked social media mentions of Bella Vista Restaurant. The few reviews that existed were mixed at best, with common complaints about high prices, pretentious atmosphere, and mediocre food quality. Several reviewers specifically mentioned that the restaurant felt out of place in its location. The most damning review came from Phoenix Weekly's food critic, who wrote, "Bella Vista seems confused about its identity and target market." The strip mall location suggests casual family dining, but the prices and pretentious menu descriptions suggest fine dining aspirations that the kitchen simply cannot deliver. The service is eager but inexperienced, and the overall experience feels like an expensive mistake. That review appeared 6 weeks after opening, and I watched through my coffee shop surveillance post as Marcus spent an entire evening pacing outside the restaurant, repeatedly reading something on his phone that was clearly making him increasingly agitated. 2 months after the grand opening, the signs of imminent failure were unmistakable. The restaurant was now only open Friday and Saturday nights, and even then, I rarely saw more than a handful of occupied tables. Marcus had clearly stopped paying for professional cleaning services, because the windows were perpetually smudged and the exterior looked increasingly shabby. More tellingly, I started noticing vendors having what appeared to be heated conversations with Marcus outside the restaurant. Late payment notices were taped to the front door on several occasions, though they were quickly removed. The writing was on the wall, and it was written in red ink. It was during this period that I received an unexpected phone call from Marcus himself. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Sarah, I need to talk to you about something important." His voice sounded strained, exhausted. "Can we meet for coffee? Somewhere private?" "I think we said everything that needed saying at your apartment, Marcus. Please. This is about the restaurant, about the money, about making things right with Emma and Olivia. I've learned some things about myself over the past few months, and I think you deserve to hear them." Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet him at a Starbucks in Scottsdale, far from both our usual neighborhoods. What I found when I arrived was a Marcus I'd never seen before, humble, defeated, and apparently ready to admit some hard truths. "The restaurant is failing," he said without preamble as soon as I sat down. "Not slowly, not gradually. It's crashing and burning spectacularly, and I'm going to lose every penny that Mom and Dad invested." "I'm sorry to hear that." I kept my voice neutral, though internally I was amazed that he was finally acknowledging reality. "No, you're not. And you shouldn't be. I was an idiot, Sarah. Worse than an idiot. I was selfish and entitled and completely delusional about my own abilities." He ran his hands through his hair, which was noticeably less perfectly styled than it had been during his brief period of false confidence. "What changed your mind?" "Reality. Math. The brutal truth that good intentions and family money can't overcome terrible business planning." He pulled out his phone and showed me a spreadsheet. "I've been tracking every expense, every bit of revenue, every customer interaction for 2 months. The numbers don't lie, and they're catastrophic." I looked at his data, and it was even worse than I'd suspected from my surveillance. Bella Vista was losing approximately $15,000 per month after all expenses. At that rate, the remaining college fund money would be gone within 6 weeks. "I want to close the restaurant and return whatever money is left to Emma and Olivia's college funds," Marcus continued. "It won't be the full amount. I've already burned through about 60% of it, but I can probably recover $70,000 to $80,000 if I act quickly." The offer was surprising, but I wasn't ready to let him off the hook that easily. "What about your staff? What about the lease obligations? What about all the vendors you owe money to?" "I'll figure that out. I'll take responsibility for those debts personally. The girls' education money shouldn't pay for my mistakes any more than it already has." For the first time since this whole ordeal began, Marcus actually sounded like he understood the magnitude of what he'd done. But understanding and fixing were two different things. "It's too late for partial repayment, Marcus. You can't steal someone's money, lose most of it on a vanity project, and then expect gratitude for returning the scraps." "I know. I'm not expecting gratitude. I'm just trying to do the right thing, even though it's way too late to actually make things right." I studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation or self-serving calculation. What I saw instead was genuine remorse and exhaustion. "Why tell me this? Why not just close the restaurant quietly and return whatever money you can without involving me? Because I need you to know that I finally understand what I took from Emma and Olivia. Not just money, security, options, the freedom to choose their futures without financial stress. I need you to know that I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to make up for that, even if I can never fully succeed." It was the first genuine apology I'd heard from anyone in my family since this nightmare began. But it was also coming far too late to change anything meaningful. I appreciate you telling me this, Marcus, but you should know that Emma and Olivia's futures are already secure. More secure than they ever would have been with just the college funds you stole. His confusion was evident. What do you mean? I smiled for the first time in months when thinking about my family. I mean that while you and our parents were playing games with $180,000, I was building something much bigger. Something that makes your theft look like pocket change. Sarah, what are you talking about? You'll find out soon enough. But first, I want to watch you explain to Mom and Dad that their retirement sacrifice was completely pointless. I want them to understand that they destroyed their integrity and our family relationships for absolutely nothing. Marcus stared at me with dawning comprehension. You have something. Some kind of backup plan. I have something much better than a backup plan. I have financial independence that you can't steal and they can't manipulate. And when I reveal it, when they realize how catastrophically they misjudged this entire situation, the shame is going to destroy them. As I walked away from that coffee shop, leaving Marcus to contemplate the magnitude of his failure, I felt a sense of anticipation I hadn't experienced since college. The moment of revelation was approaching, and it was going to be even more satisfying than I'd imagined. The restaurant would close within 2 weeks. My parents would face the devastating reality that their golden boy had failed spectacularly with their retirement money. And then I would reveal the trust fund that made their sacrifice look like the meaningless gesture it had always been. Justice was coming, and it was going to be beautiful. The call I'd been waiting for came on a Tuesday evening exactly 2 weeks after my coffee meeting with Marcus. Mom's voice on the phone was barely recognizable, hoarse, shaky, and heavy with defeat. Sarah, we need to see you. Can you come over tonight? Please. It's about Marcus and everything. I could hear Dad in the background speaking in low, urgent tones to someone who sounded like it might be their accountant. The sound of financial crisis was unmistakable. Spreadsheets rustling, calculator buttons clicking, and the kind of tense conversation that happens when people realize they're in serious trouble. I'll be there in an hour, I said, though part of me wanted to drag this out longer, to let them marinate in their failure a bit more. But I was also eager to finally deploy the nuclear option I'd been holding in reserve. James insisted on coming with me for moral support, and we arranged for our neighbor to watch Emma and Olivia. Are you sure you want to do this tonight? He asked as we drove to my parents' house. Once you tell them about the trust fund, there's no taking it back. Your relationship with them will never be the same. It's already not the same. They made sure of that when they decided to steal from their granddaughters. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, feeling a mixture of anticipation and genuine sadness about what was about to happen. Besides, they need to understand the full scope of their miscalculation. They didn't just steal money, they destroyed family relationships for literally nothing. We found my parents and Marcus sitting around their dining room table, which was covered with papers, bank statements, and what appeared to be legal documents. The scene looked like a war room after a devastating defeat. Dad had aged visibly since I'd last seen him. New lines around his eyes, grayer hair, a slump in his posture that spoke of crushing disappointment. Marcus looked even worse. The confident entrepreneur who had dismissed my concerns just months ago was gone, replaced by someone who looked genuinely broken. When he saw me, he immediately stood up. Sarah, thank you for coming. I know this is awkward, but we need to discuss the financial situation and figure out how to move forward. Move forward? I kept my voice carefully neutral. What exactly did you have in mind? Mom gestured to the papers on the table. The restaurant is closing permanently. We're liquidating everything we can to recover whatever money is possible for Emma and Olivia's education funds. Dad picked up a legal document. We've consulted with an attorney about the best way to handle this. After paying off the immediate debts and lease obligations, we can probably recover about $73,000 of the original $180,000. Probably? James spoke for the first time since we'd arrived, his voice sharp with anger. You stole $180,000 from our daughters and you can, probably, return less than half of it? It wasn't stolen. Dad began automatically, then stopped himself. I mean, legally it wasn't theft, but I understand why you see it that way. We made a terrible mistake in judgment. Marcus leaned forward across the table. Dad, stop. It was theft. Maybe not legally, but morally, absolutely. We took money that belonged to Emma and Olivia's futures and gambled it on my ego project. Let's at least be honest about what we did. The admission surprised me. This was a more mature, self-aware Marcus than I'd ever seen before. But it was also too little, too late. So what's the plan? I asked. You return $73,000 and we all pretend this never happened? Family dinners go back to normal? Emma and Olivia just accept that their college funds were decimated by their uncle's midlife crisis? No, Mom said quickly. We know we can't just pretend this didn't happen, but we're hoping that over time, with the partial repayment and maybe additional contributions from our retirement savings. Your retirement savings? I interrupted. The same retirement savings that you already depleted, giving Marcus $75,000 for his previous failed ventures? The room went silent. Marcus looked genuinely shocked. You told them about that? They had a right to know, Dad said defensively. If we're asking them to trust us going forward, they need to understand the full financial picture. Which is what, exactly? James asked. How much of your retirement did you spend on Marcus before you moved on to stealing from our children? Dad pulled out another set of papers. Our retirement accounts are down to about $180,000 total. At our age, with our current savings rate, we're looking at having to work until we're 75 to maintain our current lifestyle. The number hit me like a physical blow, but not because I felt sorry for them. They had destroyed their own financial security in addition to stealing from their granddaughters. The scope of their financial incompetence was staggering. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, I said slowly. You spent $75,000 of your retirement on Marcus's previous failures. Then you stole $180,000 from Emma and Olivia's college funds for this restaurant disaster. And now you have essentially no retirement savings and less than $75,000 to return to the children you robbed. That's about right, Mom admitted, tears starting to flow again. And your plan to make this right is to work until you're 75, and maybe contribute a few $1,000s a year to new college accounts that you would also have legal access to steal from again if Marcus comes up with another brilliant business idea. Sarah, Marcus interjected, I know you have every right to be angry, but I want you to know that I'm going to spend the rest of my life making this up to Emma and Olivia. I'm getting a real job, I'm going to contribute to their college funds, and I'm never going to ask Mom and Dad for money again. A real job doing what? You have no marketable skills, no relevant experience, and a track record of failure in everything you've attempted. The brutal honesty of my words made everyone wince, but I was past caring about their feelings. You're 28 years old with the resume of someone who's never held a stable job for more than 18 months. What employer is going to pay you enough to meaningfully contribute to college funds that you helped destroy? I don't know, Marcus admitted, but I have to try. No, I said firmly, you don't have to try. Because Emma and Olivia don't need your help. They don't need your guilt money, they don't need your career rehabilitation project, and they definitely don't need any more financial assistance from this family. Dad looked confused. Sarah, I understand you're angry, but the girls are going to need college funding. Even with student loans and scholarships, the costs will not be a problem. I pulled out my phone and opened the portfolio management app that showed my investment accounts. Because unlike the rest of you, I actually planned for my daughter's futures. I placed the phone on the table, screen facing up, showing the current portfolio value, $2,547,291. The silence that followed was deafening. All three of them stared at the screen like they were looking at something that couldn't possibly be real. What is that? Mom whispered. That's a trust fund I established 5 years ago using income from freelance consulting work. It's invested in diversified growth portfolios, tech stocks, and cryptocurrency. As of this morning, it's worth over $2.5 million. Dad picked up my phone with shaking hands, scrolling through the account details. This is real. This is actually your money? Every penny. Earned through my own work, invested through my own research, grown through my own financial planning. Emma and Olivia's college educations are fully funded, along with graduate school, down payments on their first homes, and seed money for their own businesses if they choose entrepreneurship. Marcus slumped back in his chair like I'd physically struck him. You've had this the whole time? While we were panicking about college costs, while Mom and Dad were sacrificing their retirement, you had over $2 million sitting in investment accounts? I had it because I earned it. Because I planned for it. Because I understood that financial security comes from hard work and smart decisions. Not from stealing from children or enabling family members' delusions of grandeur. Why didn't you tell us? Mom asked, her voice barely audible. Because it wasn't any of your business. Because I wanted to see how far you would go with your betrayal. Because I needed to understand who you really were when you thought the stakes mattered. I took my phone back and put it away. And now I know. James spoke up, his voice cold with anger. You stole from our daughters when their mother had already secured their futures multiple times over. You destroyed your own retirement to fund a vanity project while your granddaughters were already millionaires. Do you understand how monumentally stupid that makes you look? We didn't know, Dad protested weakly. You didn't ask, I corrected. You didn't trust. You didn't communicate. You just assumed that because I took the safe path with my career, I couldn't possibly be building wealth or planning effectively for my family's future. Sarah, please, Mom reached across the table toward me. We made a terrible mistake, but we're still family. Can't we find a way to work through this? I looked at each of them in turn. My parents, who had destroyed their integrity and financial security for nothing, and my brother, who had finally learned the consequences of his entitled behavior far too late to matter. Here's what's going to happen, I said calmly. You're going to return every penny you can recover, from the restaurant disaster to a new education account that only James and I can access. You're going to remove yourselves as joint account holders from any financial accounts associated with my family. And you're going to accept that your relationship with Emma, Olivia, James, and me will never be the same. That seems fair, Marcus said quietly. More than fair, actually. I'm not finished. I stood up, preparing to leave. You're also going to live with the knowledge that you destroyed our family relationships for absolutely nothing. That you sacrificed your retirement, your integrity, and your granddaughter's trust for a failed restaurant that I could have bought outright without even touching the principal on the trust fund. The weight of that statement settled over them, like a suffocating blanket. They had gambled everything on Marcus's restaurant dreams when I could have funded 10 such restaurants without affecting my family's financial security. The saddest part, I continued, is that if you had simply asked for help, if you had treated me like a valued family member instead of a convenient source of funding, I might have helped Marcus start a more realistic business venture. But you chose deception and theft instead of honesty and communication. As James and I walked toward the door, Dad called after us. Sarah, wait, what can we do to fix this? There must be something. I turned back one last time. You can learn to live with the consequences of your choices. And you can remember that the next time someone underestimates the quiet, responsible family member, they might be sitting on a fortune that makes your schemes look like pocket change. The drive home was silent until James finally spoke. That was brutal. Are you okay? I'm better than okay, I said, and I meant it. I'm free. Free from their manipulation. Free from their financial drama. And free from ever having to doubt my own worth again. The war was over, and I had won more decisively than I'd ever imagined possible. In the weeks following the devastating confrontation at my parents' house, the ripple effects of the truth spread through our extended family like wildfire. Word traveled fast when a family implodes over financial betrayal, especially when the numbers involved were as staggering as ours. The first call came from my Aunt Patricia, Mom's sister, who lived in Denver and had always been the family peacekeeper. Sarah, honey, your mother called me in tears. She said there was some kind of misunderstanding about college funds and investments. Can you help me understand what really happened? I gave Patricia the unvarnished truth. The theft, the failed restaurant, the depleted retirement accounts, and the trust fund revelation that had shocked everyone. The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. "Let me get this straight," Patricia finally said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "They stole $180,000 from their granddaughters, lost most of it on Marcus's restaurant fantasy, and did all this while you had already secured the girls' futures with millions of dollars they never knew about?" "That's exactly right. And they're calling this a misunderstanding? Apparently that's the family spin they're going with." Patricia let out a bitter laugh. "Your mother always was good at rewriting history when it didn't suit her narrative. But Sarah, honey, what they did to you and those girls? That's not a misunderstanding. That's a betrayal so deep I don't know how you recover from it." Over the following days, I received similar calls from cousins, family friends, and even some of my parents' neighbors who had apparently heard enough of the story to be curious about the details. Each conversation reinforced the same conclusion. What my family had done was not just financially catastrophic, but morally indefensible. Meanwhile, the practical aftermath was unfolding exactly as I'd predicted. Marcus, true to his word, was attempting to liquidate the restaurant assets and return whatever money he could recover. The process was messy and expensive, involving lawyers, creditors, and a lease termination that required additional payments. 2 weeks after our confrontation, Marcus texted me with an update. "Final settlement complete. Recovered $68,400 for Emma and Olivia. Where should I send it?" The amount was even less than his earlier estimate, which didn't surprise me. Failed businesses rarely recover much value in liquidation, especially when they're closed during their first few months of operation. Still, I gave him the account information for a new education savings account that only James and I could access. More interesting than the money recovery was observing how my parents were handling their new reality. Dad had immediately started working longer hours at the accounting firm, clearly hoping to rebuild their retirement savings through increased earnings. Mom had taken a part-time job at a local retail store, something she hadn't done since I was in elementary school. But beyond the financial adjustments, I could see that the emotional weight of their choices was crushing them. During one of Emma's dance recitals, I spotted my parents sitting in the back row, looking like they wanted to approach us but didn't dare. The confident grandparents who had once bragged about their financial wisdom and family leadership were now clearly unsure of their place in their granddaughters' lives. Emma noticed them too. "Why are Grandma and Grandpa sitting so far away?" she asked after her performance. "They usually come backstage to take pictures." James and I had agreed on how to handle these questions. We weren't going to poison our daughters' relationships with their grandparents, but we also weren't going to pretend that nothing had changed. "Grandma and Grandpa are going through some difficult times right now," I explained carefully. "Sometimes adults make mistakes that affect the whole family, and it takes time to figure out how to fix things." "What kind of mistakes?" Olivia was always the more persistent questioner. "The kind that involve trust and keeping promises. Nothing you need to worry about, sweetheart. Daddy and I will make sure you're always taken care of." That evening, as we were putting the girls to bed, Emma asked a question that broke my heart. "Mommy, did Grandma and Grandpa stop loving us?" The innocence of her concern reminded me why I was so angry about this situation. Emma and Olivia couldn't understand the financial complexities or adult motivations, but they could sense the change in family dynamics. Their grandparents' betrayal had affected them even though they didn't know the details. "No, baby," I assured her. "Grandma and Grandpa love you very much. Sometimes grown-ups make choices that hurt the people they love. But that doesn't mean the love goes away. It just means relationships get complicated." 3 weeks after the confrontation, I received an unexpected visitor at my office. Marcus appeared at my desk during lunch hour, looking nervous and carrying a manila folder. "I know you probably don't want to see me," he began, "but I have something I need to show you. Something that might change how you think about what happened." I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "You have 5 minutes." He opened the folder and pulled out what appeared to be financial statements and legal documents. After the restaurant failed, I started going through all the paperwork more carefully. I found some things that I think you should know about, such as the investment advice Mom and Dad got about the restaurant venture. It didn't come from nowhere. He handed me a business card, They consulted with a financial advisor who specifically recommended investing in Marcus's business as a way to diversify their portfolio and help their son simultaneously. I looked at the card. Stephen Walsh, Financial Planning Services. The name meant nothing to me. This guy convinced them that family business investments were a smart retirement strategy, Marcus continued. He told them that supporting my restaurant would give them both emotional satisfaction and financial returns that traditional retirement accounts couldn't match. I studied the documents Marcus had brought. Stephen Walsh appeared to be a legitimate financial advisor, but his recommendations were clearly questionable. Several pages of notes showed calculations suggesting that a successful restaurant investment could outperform stock market returns significantly. Marcus, this doesn't change anything. Mom and Dad still chose to steal from Emma and Olivia rather than risk their own money. I know, but I wanted you to understand that they genuinely believed they were making a smart financial decision, not just enabling my bad judgment. This Walsh guy really sold them on the idea that they could help me while also improving their retirement prospects. The revelation added another layer to the story, but it didn't diminish my anger. If anything, it made my parents' betrayal worse. They had been so eager to find a way to help Marcus while also benefiting themselves that they'd fallen for questionable financial advice and rationalized stealing from their granddaughters. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked. "Because I'm trying to understand how we got here, and I think you deserve to know that this wasn't just about Mom and Dad choosing me over Emma and Olivia. They really thought they'd found a win-win solution. A win-win solution that involved taking money that wasn't theirs without permission. Yeah, that part is inexcusable no matter what the financial advisor told them." Marcus gathered his papers and stood to leave. "There's one more thing. I've been accepted to a community college program for restaurant management. I'm not giving up on the food industry entirely, but I'm going to learn it properly this time, starting from the bottom, working in other people's restaurants, understanding the business before I ever try to run one again." The admission surprised me. That's actually sensible. I figured I owed it to Emma and Olivia to become someone worthy of their respect, even if it takes years. He paused at my office door. "I know you don't believe me yet, but I really am going to spend the rest of my life making this right." After Marcus left, I sat in my office thinking about the complexity of family relationships and financial betrayal. The Stephen Walsh angle didn't excuse my parents' actions, but it did provide context for how they'd rationalized their choices. They had wanted to believe that they could help Marcus while also helping themselves, and they'd been willing to take money that wasn't legally theirs to make it happen. That evening, I shared the Stephen Walsh revelation with James over dinner. "Does it change how you feel about them?" he asked. "Not really. If anything, it makes me angrier. They were so desperate to find a way to help Marcus that they fell for questionable financial advice and convinced themselves that stealing from our daughters was actually smart planning. What about Marcus? He seems genuinely committed to changing." I considered the question carefully. "Marcus has always been good at saying the right things when he's in trouble. The test will be whether he follows through on the community college program and actually builds a career instead of jumping to the next get-rich-quick scheme. And if he does? If he really changes? Then maybe someday Emma and Olivia will have an uncle they can respect, but that's years away, and it doesn't change what he already did to them." 6 months after the confrontation, I received a formal letter from my parents' attorney regarding the final financial settlement. They had managed to recover $68,400 from the restaurant liquidation, as Marcus had promised, and they were also contributing an additional $15,000 from their remaining savings as a gesture of accountability. The total of $83,400 was deposited into Emma and Olivia's new education account, which now had stronger legal protections to prevent any future unauthorized access. Combined with the trust fund I'd already established, my daughters were not just financially secure, they were wealthy enough to pursue any dreams they might develop. More importantly, the ordeal had taught me valuable lessons about family dynamics and personal boundaries. I had learned that blood relationships don't automatically create loyalty or trustworthiness. I had discovered my own capacity for strategic thinking and decisive action when my children's futures were threatened. And I had realized that financial independence provides more than just security. It provides the freedom to enforce your values without compromise. The relationship with my parents would never fully recover, But it had evolved into something more honest, if less warm. They understood now that their actions had consequences, and that I was not someone who could be manipulated or taken advantage of. Holiday gatherings were cordial but restrained. They spent time with Emma and Olivia, but always with the understanding that James and I set the terms. As for Marcus, he did follow through on his community college enrollment. 6 months later, he was working as a line cook at a respected restaurant in downtown Phoenix, earning minimum wage but apparently committed to learning the industry from the ground up. Whether this represented genuine change or just another phase in his pattern of brief enthusiasm remained to be seen. The trust fund continued growing, reaching $2.8 million by the end of the year. Emma and Olivia remained blissfully unaware of the family drama that had swirled around their college funds, but they did notice that their relationship with their grandparents had become more formal and less spontaneous. Looking back, I realized that my family's betrayal had been a gift in disguise. It had forced me to recognize my own strength, clarify my values, and establish boundaries that protected my immediate family from future manipulation. Most importantly, it had proven that the quiet, responsible family member who follows the safe path might actually be the most powerful person in the room. The war was over, and I had won more completely than I'd ever imagined possible. But the real victory wasn't the money or the humiliation of my betrayers. It was the knowledge that I could protect my daughters from anything, even their own family. 2 years have passed since the night I revealed the trust fund that changed everything. As I sit here today, watching Emma and Olivia play in the backyard of our new home, a beautiful property we bought outright with investment proceeds, I can honestly say that my family's betrayal was the best thing that ever happened to me. That might sound strange coming from someone whose parents stole their children's college funds, but hear me out. Before this ordeal, I was living my life according to other people's expectations and definitions of success. I was the responsible one, the safe choice, the daughter who colored inside the lines and never caused drama. I had internalized the idea that quiet competence was somehow less valuable than Marcus's flashy charisma. The betrayal forced me to recognize my own worth and power. Not just financial power, though the trust fund certainly provided that, but the power that comes from strategic thinking, careful planning, and refusing to accept other people's limitations on your potential. Emma is now 10 years old and has decided she wants to be a marine biologist. Last month, she asked if we could take a family trip to the Galapagos Islands to see the research stations where Charles Darwin developed his theory of evolution. James and I looked at each other and smiled. Of course, I told her, we can do that this summer. The freedom to say yes to our daughter's dreams, no matter how expensive or ambitious, is something I never take for granted. That freedom exists because I built something substantial, while everyone else was focused on Marcus's latest scheme. Olivia, meanwhile, has maintained her interest in space exploration. She's already talking about attending space camp next year, and has been reading college-level astronomy textbooks that she checks out from the library. When she asks about becoming an astronaut, I don't have to worry about the cost of the education and training that dream would require. The trust fund, now worth $3.4 million, can support whatever paths my daughters choose to pursue. But this story isn't really about money, even though money is what made the headlines in our family drama. It's about respect, boundaries, and the importance of never underestimating the quiet people in your life. 6 months ago, Marcus graduated from his community college restaurant management program. He called to invite me to the ceremony, which surprised me. Even more surprising was that I actually wanted to attend. The Marcus who walked across that stage was different from the entitled young man who had stolen from his nieces. This Marcus had worked full-time while attending school, maintained a 3.8 GPA, and earned genuine respect from his instructors and classmates. After the ceremony, he introduced me to his girlfriend, Angela, a nursing student who clearly had no patience for drama or excuses. Marcus has told me about the mistakes he made with your family, she said directly. I want you to know that the person I'm dating now would never do those things. People can change if they really want to. I appreciated her honesty, and I could see that Marcus had found someone who held him accountable rather than enabling his worst impulses. Whether this relationship would last was anyone's guess, but it showed better judgment than he'd displayed in years. I got a job offer, Marcus told me privately after the graduation celebration. Assistant manager position at a restaurant group that owns 4 locations in Phoenix. It's not glamorous, but it's a real career track with real responsibilities. That's great, Marcus. I'm proud of you for sticking with the program. I know I can't undo what I did to Emma and Olivia, he said quietly. But I want you to know that I think about it every day. Every time I make a decision now, I ask myself if it's something they could be proud of when they're old enough to understand what happened. The conversation gave me hope that Marcus might genuinely have changed, but it also reinforced my decision to maintain boundaries. Trust, once broken as completely as he'd broken it, takes years to rebuild, and it requires consistent actions, not just words. My parents have also made adjustments to their lives, though their changes feel more forced by circumstances than driven by genuine growth. Dad is now 71 and still working full-time, having delayed his retirement indefinitely to rebuild their savings. Mom has become a fixture at the retail store where she works, known for her reliability and attention to detail, but I can see the exhaustion in her eyes during family gatherings. Their financial situation has stabilized somewhat. They're no longer in crisis mode, but they're facing a retirement that will be much more modest than they'd originally planned. The irony is that if they had simply asked me for help with Marcus's business venture instead of stealing from Emma and Olivia, I could have provided guidance and even funding that might have led to a successful outcome. But that would have required treating me as an equal family member rather than as a convenient source of resources to be manipulated. It would have required acknowledging that the safe daughter might actually have valuable insights about business and finance. Last Christmas, during our now carefully orchestrated family dinner, Dad made a comment that revealed how little he still understood about what had happened. "It's too bad about the restaurant," he said. "Marcus really did have some good ideas. Maybe someday when our finances are stronger we can help him try again." The comment showed that he still didn't grasp the fundamental problem. It wasn't about having enough money to fund Marcus's dreams. It was about the pattern of enabling irresponsible behavior while expecting other family members to bear the costs. "Dad," I said calmly, "Marcus doesn't need financial help anymore. He needs to build his career through his own efforts. That's how people develop genuine confidence and competence." "But family should help family," he insisted, repeating the same justification he'd used to rationalize stealing from his granddaughters. "You're right," I agreed. "Family should help family. Which is why I helped Emma and Olivia by building their trust fund. Which is why James and I help each other by communicating honestly about our financial decisions. And which is why I'm helping all of you by refusing to enable destructive patterns." The distinction was lost on him, but it was clear to everyone else at the table. Marcus nodded approvingly. Mom looked uncomfortable, but didn't argue. Emma and Olivia continued eating their dessert, blissfully unaware of the adult tensions swirling around them. As this story comes to an end, I want to share the most important lessons I've learned from this experience. First, never assume that family loyalty flows in all directions equally. Some people will take advantage of your love and trust if you let them, and setting boundaries isn't cruel. It's necessary for everyone's well-being. Second, the quiet, responsible family members are often building something more substantial than the flashy risk-takers get credit for. Don't let other people's definitions of success make you doubt your own value or capabilities. Third, financial independence isn't just about money, it's about freedom. The freedom to make choices based on your values rather than your fears. The freedom to protect the people you love from manipulation and exploitation. The freedom to say no to requests that violate your principles. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, the best revenge isn't cruelty or public humiliation. The best revenge is building a life so successful and fulfilling that your betrayer's actions become irrelevant to your happiness. Today, Emma and Olivia are thriving in ways that have nothing to do with the family drama that once consumed so much of my energy. They're confident, curious, and secure in the knowledge that their parents will support their dreams. They have a relationship with their grandparents that, while different from what it once was, is still meaningful and loving. Marcus is building a legitimate career and seems committed to becoming someone his nieces can respect. My parents are learning to live with the consequences of their choices while still maintaining their roles as grandparents within appropriate boundaries. And James and I have a marriage that's stronger than ever, built on complete financial transparency and shared values about family and responsibility. The trust fund that shocked my family 2 years ago has continued growing and now represents not just financial security, but a legacy of careful planning and strategic thinking that I hope to pass on to my daughters. If you're facing a family betrayal of your own, remember this: the people who underestimate you are giving you a powerful advantage. Use it wisely, build something they can't tear down, and never let their limitations define your possibilities. Your quiet strength might be the most powerful force in the room. And when the time comes to reveal what you've built while they were busy with their schemes, the shock on their faces will be worth every moment of patience it took to get there. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it inspires you to recognize your own worth and never let anyone steal your future, literally or figuratively. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.